Hello there! My name is Tanner, and I'd like to welcome you back to my YouTube channel. So for this week's video, I thought it was high time you guys got to hear my interpretation of another myth. However, the myth I chose specifically for this video, as well as the sequel myth for next week's video, will not be originating from Greece. In fact, it'll come from much further east, specifically from the land of the rising sun itself, Japan. So for this week's video, I will be telling you the tragic story of the lovers Izanami and Izanagi, and for next week's video, I will be talking about the adventures of the three godly siblings, Amaterasu, Tsukuyomi, and Susanoo. They'll get a mention in this video, but they won't be the focus. So, without further ado, here is my interpretation of the story of Izanami and Izanagi. Enjoy! The dimly lit chambers were filled with the labored breathing of a mother about to give birth. The goddess Izanami laid on the bed, deep in the throes of labor, and her husband, the god Izanagi, knelt next to her, holding her hand and coaching her gently. "Soon, my love," he said to her, "soon our son will be born, and a new god will be welcomed into our family." His wife looked over to him and gave him a strained smile, which immediately became a scream of utter agony. Suddenly, the chamber was filled with blazing light, and soon after, the sound of a baby crying rang throughout. However, what should have been a day of celebration turned into a day of tragedy, for that baby was Kagutsuchi, fire incarnate, and Izanami was so grievously burned from giving birth to him that soon, in that very chamber, laying on that very bed, she breathed her last breath. Izanagi bowed his head, his wife's hand still in his, and was overcome with grief. He sat there sobbing until he heard the cries of his newborn son. As he listened, his grief slowly turned to rage, and Izanagi drew his sword and sliced Kagutsuchi into 8 pieces. Where those 8 pieces fell, great volcanoes sprang across Japan. Before Izanagi sheathed his sword, 2 drops of godly blood fell from the blade. From those drops of blood, 2 dragons sprung forth, and became Ryujin, god of the sea, and Kuraokami, god of snow and rain. When the deed was done, Izanagi felt his rage fade into grim determination. "Izanami," he said, "I will find you, and I will bring you back to the world of the living. This I swear." So he set out, traveling for days on end. Days turned to weeks. Weeks turned to months. Months turned to years. Until finally, Izanagi found the entrance to Yomi, the land of the dead, the shadow of the upper world. He searched and searched and searched, until at last he found her. "Izanagi, my husband, why are you here?" she asked him, her face hidden in shadow. "My love," he replied, "please return with me to the light of the living world once again." "Oh, my husband," Izanami said sadly, "I wish it was so simple. You see, I have already eaten food prepared on the hearth of Yomi, and as such, I cannot leave." Izanagi was understandably distraught by this. "Izanami, you don't understand," he said, his voice rising. "Life without you is like the day with no sun, like the night with no stars. Life has no meaning without you by my side. I am not leaving here without you." For a moment, there was silence. Then, Izanagi heard his wife let out a small chuckle. "All right," she said. "I will talk with the Council of Yomi and see what can be arranged. However, I cannot do so right now, as I need to rest and refresh myself before I do. While I rest, I merely request you do not look at me, for I fear that if you saw me, all would be lost." Izanagi thought this was a strange request, but In the end, he agreed to wait while she rested and refreshed herself. He waited, and waited, and waited, for what felt like decades. Soon, he grew worried. What if something's happening to her and I'm not there to defend her? He thought to himself. So, ignoring her request, he decided to just take a little peek into her chambers, just in case. The chambers were very dark, and he couldn't see if she was okay. So, he took the decorative comb out of his hair, broke it into 5 pieces, and turned one of the pieces into a lit torch so he could see. What he saw chilled him to his very bones. The creature laying in the bed certainly looked like his wife, but not as he remembered her. Instead of the beautiful goddess full of life that he knew, all he saw was a corpse. Flesh rotting, bones exposed, crawling with worms and insects. Izanagi tried to back out of the room as quietly as he could, but as he did so, he lost his grip on the torch, and it clattered to the floor. The noise woke Izanami with a start, and for a moment they stared at each other in silence. Suddenly, Izanagi turned on his heel and bolted. Izanami screamed in rage and betrayal, and she summoned the she-demon Shikome and sent her chasing after Izanagi. As Izanagi ran as fast as his godly legs could carry him, he threw one of the other pieces of the comb behind him, and it magically transformed into a bunch of grapes. The bunch of grapes proved to be an excellent distraction for the ravenously hungry Shikome, who paused in her chase and ate. As soon as the grapes were gone, however, she took up the chase again, and soon closed the distance between her and Izanagi. However, Izanagi threw another piece of the comb behind him, and as it hit the ground, suddenly a bamboo forest magically grew from where it landed. This too proved a good distraction, as Shikome had to slice through the bamboo, eating it along the way, in order to reach Izanagi. However, she soon succeeded, and took up the chase yet again. Once again, Shikome nearly closed the distance. However, Izanagi threw another piece of comb behind him, and as it hit the ground, a river suddenly flowed through. This was not an obstacle Shikome could drink away, so it took her a good while to cross the river and take up the chase again. Izanagi was getting so close to the entrance, but Shikome was gaining on him yet again. Finally, he threw the 5th and final piece of the comb behind him. This magically transformed into a peach, oddly enough, which, of course, the ravenous Shikome stopped to eat. This provided enough of a distraction for him to finally reach the gate. As soon as he was on the other side, he summoned up as much of his godly strength as he could, and rolled an enormous boulder in front of the entrance to Yomi. Izanagi rested his back against the boulder and sighed in relief. But soon he heard an all-too-familiar scream on the other side of the boulder. "Izanagi!" Izanami shrieked. "Because you betrayed my trust, 1,000 people will be taken from the world of the living every day." "Very well," Izanagi retorted. "I'll just have to give life to 1,500 people a day." With that, he went home to clean and purify himself at a nearby waterfall. As the water cascaded down his body, 3 gods magically sprang from the drops. Amaterasu, goddess of the sun, sprang from the water streaming from his right eye. Tsukuyomi, god of the moon, sprang from the water streaming from his left eye. And Susanoo, god of storms, sprang from the water streaming from his nose. Izanagi then gave his 3 new children pieces of the living world to rule. Amaterasu would rule over the day, Tsukuyomi would rule over the night, and Susanoo would rule over the waves of the sea. These 3 would eventually have many stories of their own for people to tell, but those stories are for another time. And there we have it. That was my interpretation of the story of Izanagi and Izanami. What a tragedy, am I right? If you like this video and you want more, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe down below so you don't miss any new videos. Also, if there are any other ideas you want to see in future videos, please leave your thoughts in the comments down below, and it might just happen. Alright, well, that's all the time I have for this video, so I'll see you all next week with the story of Amaterasu and the cave. See you then!